Hi everyone, and welcome at another Ask Me Anything for StartupLeap. Today we'll be talking with Rob de Feo, a startup advocate at AWS, and we'll invite him in a couple of minutes and then get to some questions. Feel free to already send in your questions, and I'm sure to repeat them and ask them to Rob. Let's see if we can get Rob in here. We're getting there. See if he's available. Ah, there's Rob. Great. Hey, good evening.
Hello, how you doing?
Hey, very good. That works. Awesome.
Yeah, it's a relief.
Great. Well, it always is. It worked before, so it should work again.
Yeah, it's all new territory for me, so yeah, it's gonna be fun.
Awesome. All right. Well, first of all, thanks for being here. Let's just do a quick introduction. For anyone who's watching, thanks again for joining us in the Ask Me Anything for StartupLeap today with Rob de Feo. Yeah, I guess that's the basic introduction. Feel free to ask questions. Rob and I will have some 10 to 15 minutes for a one-on-one. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or ask them through Slack. Then Johan will ask them here, and we'll be sure to repeat them and get your questions answered. So without further ado, Rob, thanks for being here. Your job title says startup advocate. What does that mean?
Uh, Basically, it means I help startups. I have a really fortunate position of working with an organization that is very, very focused on helping startups. And my role itself is to kind of get out there in the community, be a voice of the startup customer internally, and then also share some of that knowledge externally. So it's an awesome job.
All right, sounds good. So can you tell us a little bit about so what you do on a daily basis, but also where you came from, how you got to this position, and yeah, kind of the story that led to where you are today.
Yeah, of course. So it's difficult to kind of picture a normal day. Like the days change so much, but typically it is speaking to customers that or startups, founders, CTOs, engineers about how they're building their technology, some of the challenges they have, trying to figure out with them how to then go and solve that, and then trying to understand how that we can package this information together and then pass it out to the community. So I run a podcast, Startup Engineering, where we take them exact people are talking about, go really deep into their problem, and then we share it out with the rest of the community. I think startups do an incredible job of helping each other. And that's really kind of the essence of the role, like get them into doing that. And there was another part to your question, not just what I was doing.
Yeah. So also the other part was what's your history?
Oh,
so
right.
what have you done in the past? Can you elaborate a little bit about several roles you've had in the past?
So I have done a mixture of working for, founding startups, ultimately unsuccessful. It's kind of sort of why I'm here doing this today, right now. And then working with some large organizations as well. I've mainly been as developer. So I fall back, I like self-identify as a developer, engineer, however you kind of want to call that. Like I'm very comfortable writing code. So this is all new territory for me. But then when I kind of stepped into the world of startups, I really understood that you couldn't just write code. That's probably one of my biggest mistakes. So I work at Amazon Web Services now. Previously I worked for Expedia. Then actually I tried to work in as many different industries as possible. I found if you can write code, it's a very, very transferable skill. And like I never kind of, when I used to describe to people how I write code, no one ever found it interesting when I was going for. So I tried to work for industries or projects I thought were fun, and then mix in a few countries as well to kind of add some adventure into life. And then, as I started working with startups, I was like, that is all the adventure you need. There is so much going on with these companies achieving so much in such a short period of time.
All right, so you mentioned you co-founded a couple of companies. You're a developer. So what has been let's say the most uncomfortable thing you had to do being a developer co-founder in a startup?
I guess it's the most difficult thing is watching someone use your product in the way that you didn't intend it to be used, and realized if that's the way they wanted to use it, you could have saved a year and a half of your life, and then kind of realizing what you built is not going to be used or not needed. Now, what led to that is probably a little bit more interesting because there's lots of smaller, but still uncomfortable things I could have done that would have prevented that big, very uncomfortable experience at the end. And the umbrella thing is getting much, much closer to the people that use, people that are going to be using your product, and knowing how they use it, rather than kind of bearing away, being very happy coding, with headphones on, enjoying kind of just sort of, hitting away, feeling like you're making progress in that way, but it's not progress that people outside of your tech team care about.
Yeah. All right. So also being a tech co-founder, for example, I can imagine there are a lot of non-tech co-founders looking. What are the best ways to collaborate with a tech co-founder from your experience? If you're not a tech co-founder yourself.
Yeah, so I think I can't really think of many startups because a startup is kind of designed to scale but doesn't involve some tech. So it's something everyone needs to solve. You want to find the person that can grow with your company. If you talk about first-time founders, many people that enter a first-time founder maybe don't even have much experience, and I think almost that naivety is something that can throw you incredibly far because you just jump things that many people have a little bit more experience or later on kind of go, oh no, it's not possible. So that's an incredible thing. But you enter it into it together that this person is not necessarily finished article, but you see potential, and that's the thing you're looking for at that sort of stage. Some of the mistakes I do see, especially a business founder or many tech people experience this. Someone comes to them and say, hey, I got this awesome idea. It involves building some really complicated IA system and a few other things, and you put it together, and I know it's going to make loads of money. It's going to be a fantastic. You're like, okay, cool. So, and you want me to do it, right? Okay. And then how much are you going to give me? Oh, maybe 5-10% of the company to do this. And it's just you, so it's just an idea at this stage, and you expect all the execution on there. And it's crazy. So it's something that needs to be lined up. It's something that people work together in. So you need to figure out what an actual fair share of the value that's going to be created is inside of it. That's one of the things that people kind of get on at the beginning. Yeah.
Oh, that's good to consider.
And another one is they find the first tech person that they know, and they get blown over by, they sounded really smart, 50% of the conversation I didn't understand. And that's another mistake as well, because even if the person is super smart, if you can't understand what needed from it, that's going to cause you problems later on.
Yeah.
And there's a very good chance you haven't found someone that has the skills that you need. And then you're going to run into problems soon down the line. And I think the last class of areas that people find is they'll go for someone that is very, very senior job title in a big organization, but it's not been hands-on for a long period of time. And while that person might be great in a year, 2, 3, 4 years time, the beginning, they're going to need a team around them to execute because there's a big gap in there. So I think go where developers are, like meetups, online forums, Slack groups, check out GitHub, like be where they are and you will find them. Then try and find people that have the same interests. So if you're building an app to help, I don't know, dyslexic people, probably finding someone that has some sort of relationship that's going to help. If you find someone, if you're building a travel app, a developer that loves traveling is going to be more attracted to it. So you want, just like you want anyone else to be that, you want the same from that type of team as well. Plus, if they're a user, you sort of skip needing a product manager for at least a short period of time because they can design for themselves.
All right, sounds good. So I've also read that you've been a CTO mentor at Techstars for the past 2 years. Techstars, of course, being a startup accelerator worldwide. So why did you decide to become a mentor? What type of startups do you usually help? And can you give us some examples of the daily struggles they have? Yeah,
sure. So why to do it? I think it's one of the nicest things that I can do. Like personally, it's very, very fulfilling as a role, helping people, watching them succeed. Like personally, I feel great doing it. So like selfishly, that's kind of why I do it. And then because in my role at AWS, I got to speak to probably 500 plus, tech teams in startups about how they're building. And every time I would go and speak to one of them teams, sure, they would come to us asking questions and we'd give information back. But every startup is amazing at something. That's kind of one thing that I think is almost true throughout. Every successful startup is amazing thing. They just lack all the breadth of things you need to be really good at. And it's usually more than one thing they're excellent at. So then it would just be, sucking up all this information. And over time, because I had this really interesting viewpoint, it was just sharing around as much of this information as possible. So when it comes to mentoring, that's what it is. It's just hearing their struggles and the things that they need help with, and then being able to pull on previous experience either personally or things that I've seen other startups do successfully. I always think the second is the one that's more compelling, and then being able to share that with them. And the struggles can be anything really, without kind of going into, well, first of all, with Techstars, it tends to be kind of the earlier stage ones, people going through the cohort. Then sometimes I'll keep working with them after they've graduated, and over time. I tend to take the view that if I'm mentoring a startup for a really long period of time, something's either gone really, really right, which is the minority, or something's gone a bit wrong, or really wrong, because they should be outgrowing me. Like after a few sessions, you should have exhausted most of the information that I have, and then you should be like, hey Rob, so I got these questions, who's better than you at answering them? And that's the good kind of handoff to help people go forwards. And then the type of things that they maybe have help with, it might be how to, especially scaling a team, how to go from 1, 2, 3, 4 engineers up to 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Measuring. That's always a classic one. Like if you ask tech teams or CTOs what are they measuring, they're like, I'm measuring uptime, latency, ticket, number of tickets open, or bugs or things like this. And you're like, okay, cool. So which one of these metrics are you putting in your investor updates? And if the answer is 0, it's like, so what are we getting from this particular measure? Like often we measure things because they're easy to measure, and if they're easy to measure and people can understand how that they can adjust it, then they'll adjust their behaviors, and we've suddenly developed a behavior that's not very useful. Then what is the one? Also, like how to have that kind of relationship with the CEO. Like, what are the things that we really expect from each other? How to kind of work backwards and forwards with people like this. They're the main things, but it could be anything, which is the fun part as well.
All right, cool. So again, to everyone watching, feel free to share your questions in the chat or post them on Slack, and then Johan will forward them here. Just because there's a bit of a different topic, I'll go with the second one first. This one is from Fab Blink. I have access to awesome Russian developers who will become part of the team later. How do I tackle the bias that some people in Europe have against them? Of course, they are hackers. Any experience with offshore development?
So, I mean, there's a couple of parts to this sort of question, I guess. Like experience with offshore developers is mixed. I think that you want to, long-term, offshore developers almost present a bit of a risk because what you're having built is being built by someone that's not part of your company. And that can then be problematic if you're thinking about it as an agency model. Now, if you have developers that are offshore in the sense that they live somewhere else because you have a remote team, like that's awesome. All you're really doing is finding the best possible talent that you have without being constrained to the driving, train, walking, cycling distance to your office. And to me, I see this is like almost the starting off point of so many startups, especially in the Nordics. Like I was blown away by, in general, that was like a default first approach. We have a completely decentralized team. The CEOs live in that country, the CTO there, the tech teams everywhere, the sales team everywhere. And that's like just, I think, an awesome way to work because you're not then stuck with like the, maybe awesome developers that are around you, but are maybe too expensive or have different interests. So I think that's something you should encourage there. There's a bit of a hint around biases involved. And I think that's when you want to make sure it's part of your company culture. So if you want to have it that everyone is open-minded, they think equally about each other, you've got to build that into your culture and just sort of go, why would you think differently of someone where they're from? It's what their ability to do. It's the attributes or the personality types that we think are important for valued in the team, and then just sort of putting this across to everyone. So I think, find the people, go to the people where they are, because talent is not always available at the moment to you. But if you are using external agencies, then you do need to be aware because there is a difference in different alignment, should we say, in what people want to get out of it. An agency typically is paid by the hour or by a deliverable. So it's paid by the hour. The longer they do, the more they get paid. Paid by a deliverable, the less they do, the more they get paid for the time effect. Whereas you as a startup, you want to grow your business and have people with ownership of it, with stakes, shares, so that they then become successful and rewarded over time. And even if you have an awesome relationship with an external agency, if your startup starts to grow and your internal developers are now, their stocks are worth a great amount in the future, but external agency is not, it's going to build a problem either now or in the future. So I think you want the value, whoever's creating the value, you want inside your company. All
right. So I can imagine that's especially the case from the short term, and then of course talking short term, it's a quick step towards the MVP that you talked about in your lecture. So another question here is, what should an MVP contain, and can you give a real life example?
MVP contain, I think so. I always talk about what is the purpose of your MVP. So well, first of all, like MVP, let's just say the term. So minimal viable product. And with each of these, so minimum is like, what is the smallest piece you can do? Think about handing homework for your least exciting topic. Like, what is the smallest thing I could do to get it a pass? Viable is, it needs to work. It needs to have like, solve some sort of problem. A product, it needs to do something. It can't just be, a feature in isolation. It needs to be like a sequence of features that solves a particular problem for someone. Now, this is like a good umbrella term, but if it's not what you're trying to, if that's not the problem you have, then you might be building the wrong thing. So I kind of think there's other types of minimum viable, products. So you might have a minimal lovable product, as in if your idea is all the interfaces out in the world for this type of product suck, they're terrible, I'm going to make something that people love, then you don't really want to test, like, is it possible, will people use it? You want to see, like, how could I figure out how people could, like, literally love using it and just want to spend time and time and again. I always think, like, from developers, which makes sense, like source control. I was growing up, I can't remember now, Visual Source, say something like this, and there's loads of other ones out there. I can't think of a single one that I found pleasurable, that I would enjoy working with or using. And then if you think about GitHub now, it's, developers put their public persona and profile on there. It's a pretty fun tool to use. So they took something that was, uninteresting, unattractive, and made something incredible from it. And I think that's a great example there. Then you might have testable. So if you have a really risky part of your business and something that you just are not sure is likely or possible to happen, you want to test that out. So you want a minimal testable product. And I think this is where Airbnb just offered like a really great example, maybe a little bit all in that, as in, if we can think back before Airbnb, as in the idea that you would go stop in a stranger's house. That's a pretty risky, bet to be many things on. So instead of trying to build, is it beautiful, does it look like, how is it in, it's just testing, making a listing, whatever the minimum thing is, that's like a catalog listing of other people's homes that people could then sleep in. Now, if people then take this up, you have proven you've reduced a very significant big piece of risk that's involved. And then the second side of that, after you've done that, is proving, okay, will other people let other strangers into the house? And we have alarms on our houses for preventing this exact thing. So it's a really valid thing to go ahead and test. And they were not complex products to build from that point of view. And then once you've proven them two things, you can really jump in to accelerate going forwards. So an MVP could be a bunch of mock-ups, it could be a simple web form, or it could be something, especially if it's quite a lot more complicated, it's really an application that then starts to grow into the product that gets you to product market fit.
Yeah. So continuing on this, and of course we can keep it short because I think you partially already answered some of it. A question from Gigtor Official, for MVP building, what's your opinion about no-code or low-code platform? So any experience or recommendation? I mean, you just mentioned the forms, for example, but talking about platforms like Airbnb, I mean, there are even SaaS solutions for marketplaces these days.
Yeah. So what do I think about it? So my philosophy is you need to get your product out into market so people can try it, test, iterate quickly, and then you may need to start thinking about how you scale and everything. If you spent time building the perfect product at the beginning, you might have something you're very proud of, but something that nobody uses or is the wrong thing. And I can speak from very personal experience about that, unless you want. It's not all that satisfying. So no code, yes. I think it's a great solution for figuring out a significant chunk of problems that need to be built. It's not going to be the solution for everything, but there is a significant amount of things that can be built with no code tools that help you reduce some development effort. So if you are not a technical person, no code really allows you to build a mobile app, web form, some sort of booking flow with very minimal skills and knowledge. If you're a developer, it allows you to do that same thing using, either very little code or no code, or just doing things a lot quicker. So in many ways, at very, very embryonic early stage, think about code as like a last resort. It's not a bad thing to do if you're not building like a deep tech company. And then you can use some of these tools out there, Webflow, Bubble, kind of really well-known ones. Honeycode as well is another one from AWS that allows you to, basically with just a spreadsheet back in it, build these web forms and mobile applications. So there's quite a few out there, and they're going to continue going.
Great. All right. So moving on a little bit from your early day experience to today. I can imagine that talking to a lot of different people that you can kind of see what's happening along the startup space. And following then on Greg's question, so what are some of the trends you're currently observing in the cloud-based technology space?
I wish I could see or know what was going to come in the future. I would make some very good investment decisions if that's the case. But there are definitely some trends that I see. And I do see that there is, like tech in general, or cloud in general, has allowed that barrier to entry just to drop dramatically. I'm going to get the figure slightly wrong now, but I think if you think about like in, is it late 90s, you know, the average sort of, you know, cost to build a startup was like 5 million or something like this, because of the amount of like servers, infrastructure, people you hire to just bring a company up. And then sort of, you know, 10 years later, it looks like 50,000. That's kind of what you need to get an MVP out there, if you like. And now you can do it for a few $1,000s, which is incredible. So we see more companies come up, which allows for more things to be solved. So you see definitely that side. And then the other one is startups tend to tackle problems that are just much, much riskier for existing businesses to tackle. And so I think of Aerobotics for this one, and they're a company based in Cape Town, and they use drone technology to go and scan the fields, farmers' fields, to then build up farming intelligence data to then provide services on top. Now, they started building their own drones, but then very quickly went, well, now DJI Mavic, they build drones. They just ported their software to work with these existing drones, took out something they actually really loved doing, and then started to use that going forward. But that allowed them to accelerate in other areas. So it's just another area that was very underserved by technology. All the technology that was available was quite old and dated, and they were able to get into market really quickly and go forward with it. And the other one is like space. Like we see, you know, some startups starting to explore or use, you know, space exploration. So that same problem of needing a huge amount of infrastructure to put like, you know, rockets and satellites up into space or communicate with them. Again, that barrier's been lowered. So we'll start to see some really interesting things from companies doing things that you just I would never have thought is possible. And that to me is super exciting.
All right. So, you know, not to make it too commercial, of course, because, you know, we do have a deal with AWS, and all StartupLeap participants can get credits and support from you guys. But also to make sure that people, you know, don't see it as a negative thing. You know, things like AWS have so many features these days. You know, of course, your competitors do as well. Have you ever seen like the people struggling with potential switching costs, or thinking like later on, oh, this was the wrong decision?
I think it is super difficult to make the decision, the correct technological choices at the very beginning of a startup, other than use the cloud. I mean, that's a super easy one. From then on in, as your company grows in lots of different directions, you can't predict all these things going forwards. But what the cloud does, what AWS does specifically, is gives you so many features and products off the shelf that you can just start plugging together and start using. So that cost of experimentation is much, 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 much cheaper. Now, if I think of myself, when I had my startup, it was around using images, being able to detect items from images, and then to provide a chat interface so you can communicate about these products to see what you'd like to buy. I spent like a year and a half, 2 years building this before kind of getting out into the market. So all the things done wrong. And then I started looking more closely at AWS and started seeing that, hold on a second, if I used some of the services, I would have cut down like 2-3 months worth of the time. And then I was like, oh, if I used like these other services too, like, you know, step functions and like that would save off another couple of months. And then with the release of Recognition, Lex, and Poly, I would have saved at least another 6 months in building a whole chatbot feature. And I would have then, instead of spending so long to find out my idea wasn't working, I would have done it far, far faster. And hopefully then not run out of money, time, and energy, and being able to go, cool, I need to make this adjustment, hopefully a little small adjustment, and then let me do another experimentation. So you build into something, but what you build into always changes over time. And if you haven't built the thing that you build into, it's very cheap mentally to throw that away. All I'm doing is building an integration rather than building a product and then the integration. And many startups I see will build something and then that's not core to their business. If it's not core to your business, just don't build it. I see many startups build something that's not core to their business for whatever reason. Maybe it didn't exist, let's say this. And later on, there is something there by AWS or anyone else. They'll go, right, I don't want to build and maintain and build a relatively substandard thing of this, even if I think it's good. I'm going to go use something that exists, take my development team and put them on the thing that is the most valuable.
Yeah. All right. Here's another question. We laughed about it last week because it's such a great name, so I'll just repeat it for now. It's called the Ahoy Skipper app. They are a P2P boat rental platform. Yeah, that's a great name to remember. They're a P2P boat rental platform in the state of acquiring their first customers, so with 90% of their infrastructure in AWS. What AWS service you think is very useful for gaining traction?
Oh, okay, I'm going to hopefully Hoyskipper will give us a little bit more context. I mean, the services really help you to build something and to move faster. So there isn't like, I mean, if there was like a magic service that kind of gives you traction or gets you users, it isn't sort of there. But if you can figure out the feature that you need, then there's often a service that can help with something like this. So let's just pick a simple example here. So P2P app for hiring boats. I mean, if we took the scenario, if you figured out that, hey, if we sent a notification to people based on their location, at the weekend, we knew someone was free and there was a boat free, we'd send a notification saying, hey, come and jump onto this, or try this boat, and you try different types. You can then use, with Amplify, there's a service called Pinpoint, which allows you to segment your users and then send them targeted notifications to them that then you get information metrics on how they've responded to it. So you can then start to build up marketing campaigns on that.
Yeah.
I've really just kind of come up with a thing off the top of my head, but I don't think there's a service that would directly allow you to do that, but there's a service that gets you to the thing that allows you to do that.
Yeah. All right. So you just mentioned that most of the platforms have a couple of features that would have saved you a lot of time back in the days. A couple of years ago, you co-founded a company yourself. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that went? What kind of problem you were solving, eventually, what happened to the company?
Yeah, I think so. What kind of problem are you solving is the exact key question to ask here, because I don't think I could have given you a good answer to that. I think after doing it for 2 years and after knowing all the things I know now, the problem I was solving was I just wanted to write code and do something fun and exciting. And that's not a business problem. But the product itself was to take, so when I worked in Expedia, I was building chatbots for travel so you could discover where you wanted to go on holiday, just for your chat communication rather than saying, I want to go to like Paris, 4-star hotel, 3 nights, because that's what every web form is. So I was kind of like, that doesn't feel like a very natural way of doing something. I've got chatbots. This was like 7-8 years ago, so kind of early on the commercialization of that, like before a lot of stuff was out there. So my theory was, I've got a skill set that has a window of time before it becomes quite commonplace. I think I was correct on that because maybe people don't have the commonplace thing, but there's so many services and more people out there that does that. And I was like, right, so I want to find another industry that lets people use this. So I needed something that was ambiguous. So instead of going for travel, because that was kind of already done in a certain sense, I couldn't compete there. We looked at houses, accommodation, and like restaurants and bars, but it's so similar, same technology. So instead, we looked at fashion. Nothing about fashion. I'm wearing a terrible T-shirt. And I also had like a link to Milan. So I said, right, let's do it fashion. We'll go to Milan. We'll start a business there. And because we're taking the image, so from hotels, everything's in the review. With fashion, everything's in the photos. We use image recognition to extract items in the photograph. We landed on women's shoes because the pictures are very, very clear. It's almost one of the single items apparently that attracts the most attention other than handbags. I now know an unnormal amount of information about shoes that I am trying to forget over time. And we built this thing up that you could talk to it, it could bounce back, and you could then analyze the photographs to figure out what you liked and try and make matching recommendations. We spent months, and I mean months, figuring out colors. Like, what does red mean in a shoe compared to blue? Because, like a little bit of red is almost the same when someone says like a blue shoe. So, and then the different styles, we created this crazy big database, and we actually had a few B2B people approach us saying, hey, this is kind of interesting, we'd like to analyze everything we've got. We're like, no, we're building like a search engine, like, go away, it's just a distraction. And we kept going down this, by the way, if anyone ever does that to you, that's what you should build. Like, what you think you're building, especially when you haven't put it in front of users and properly understood yet. If people are saying, that's what we want, we just need you to adjust it, we'll pay for it, like, that's what we should have done. It would have worked so much better. And yeah, it then had this chatbot. And that time I was saying, when we put it in front of users, and we did like an infinite scroll because it was just an easier way of reducing the click on the scrub thing. Put it in front of people, and do you know what they did? They scrolled, and they scrolled, and they scrolled, and they scrolled. And I was right there. But what about the chatbot? It's, oh no, I'm really enjoying this. Just hi. And I was like, but the chatbot, please try something again. Yeah. So that's what I mean by the problem. It wasn't clear. What our stated problem was, we're trying to make shopping more efficient. Although people might like browsing around for things, if you're browsing in the domain of stuff that you like and stuff that helps you solve a problem, like I need shoes for an interview or a dinner or to match my jeans, we didn't understand it well enough.
All right, so we briefly, jumping from this one to the next, earlier on we briefly discussed being a non-tech co-founder versus being a tech co-founder. What I've always learned is that one of the best ways to find and onboard a technical co-founder is to actually have found a problem worth solving. Because then the person who will actually build the technology will know that the thing that he or she is building will actually be used. Do you see that same reasoning, or do you see other reasons why technical co-founders would join a non-technical co-founder for a startup?
I think so. Yes, I agree definitely with what you're saying. Maybe it's fun to solve like a puzzle or a problem that's not been solved before, but if no one uses it and it's like your third time of doing this, it becomes, the amount of fun drops off a cliff pretty quickly. So you do want what you're doing used, and ideally you want it having a good impact on the world. And if you can solve them two things, you've got something people are probably going to be really interested in. Then being honest. The amount of people that kind of approach tech founders going, it's a great idea, it's definitely going to work, I've got loads of people that really want it, and they're going to pay loads of money, and it's going to be super easy, we're going to go everywhere. You're just saying, look, this probably isn't going to work. Like, I think it's really important. I've spoke to a few people that do want to use it. They've said they've got these really big struggles, but I don't know how we can get them to pay for it yet. Like, I think they will. I don't know how we can, solve this and raise some money, but like, I'm going to do everything I can to make that happen. Obviously, I don't know how to build it, and I'm really relying on you to do that, but together, I think we can at least make that first step, as in get something out there and just solve something for one person. And if you can do something once and there's some repeatability into it, you can code it. So you just need to start at the beginning. And then if it's a big enough space, it'll grow. And the tech person will help you grow. They're not just sitting there to write code and finish the thing. They're going to contribute in every single part of the business, just like you're going to be contributing on the product. And it's okay to have a healthy amount of disagreement in and around that.
Yeah, talking about the other parts of collaborating, of course, what are the, let's say, other competencies, other skills that you should be looking for in a co-founder, technical or non-technical?
Good at communicating. One of the things that can happen with tech people is they're very heads down, get lots done, and then like 2 weeks later going, okay, I did this thing. And it's like, but what? No, I needed an answer earlier, or this was the wrong thing. So really good at communicating. And being good at finding out the truth. So, not having like, I think this is the way it's going to be, and then trying to find things that prove that you are correct. You want to be brave. You want to go into people and try and get the answer you don't want to get. And if you can't get that answer, then you're onto something. if you can get the answer that you're expecting, there's a very good chance you've just been very smart and kind of situated the right people, asked them the right question in the right way to get the answer you're looking for. So you want people that can seek the truth. I think in the beginning, you want people that can move really quickly and operate when it's really ambiguous. Like, you might be a great developer that can work against a spec. You might be a great business person knowing exactly when I've got it, I can sell the exact thing that I'm told, but it doesn't work like that. There's a huge amount of ambiguousness that goes around. I think you've got to be able to support each other. Often you might be in a team of like 2, 3 founders from different backgrounds, different situations, and the world will sort of seem like it's against you. So figuring out how that you can provide each other the help as needed so that you can achieve what's required. And people that are super flexible. You might find early on that the biggest problem is like, how do I build this feature? But then after you've built the feature, the biggest problem might be, like, how do I get my first 10 users? And then once we've got the first 10 users, like, well, how do we like raise money? So everyone needs to just jump onto the things they do. There's no point going, well, my job was to like, get customers. We don't have a product yet, so I'm just going to like, drink coffee. And same with the tech thing. Well, I'm just building features. I'm not going to help with this. Like, if there's an existential problem, you need to be there jumping on to help.
Yeah. Talking about actually building it and acquiring users. You earlier on, or like short time ago, you mentioned build something for 1 user and take it from there. As long as it's scalable, you can code it. We see a lot of pitch decks, with people that say like, hey, there's this $5 billion market, and within 5 years I'll have 1% of the market, those kind of things, which is of course quite top down. You can also say just, build a niche community, such as Ilvi is asking about. Build a niche community for a couple of users and see if you can find similar ones. So what do you think are, let's say, certain thresholds of thinking about, okay, should I actually build this? Or is it just, you're interested, let's build it and go for it from there?
Yeah, I think if you don't have a pitch deck in that says the total addressable market and there's a B and ideally a 0 in there too, before a number, you've probably done something wrong from a pitch deck point of view. But it's quite easy to find that information, and most markets are really big as long as you open your market up as much as possible. To me, I tend to think the other way. It's very much like, if I think it is a passion project for me and I think it just should exist in the world, and I really truly care about it, probably other people like me. And if then I can like, I hope I'm not unique in this, is building it and finding it and then adjusting it, tuning it to their kind of needs, and then you add features and attune things more to increase the size of your market. And potentially in some cases make a new market that didn't really exist or was kind of just there, but there was no way to serve it. I think online streaming of games is a fantastic example, like Twitch. I mean, that had lots of iterations, how it got started. It's a fascinating story to check out. But people, 10 years ago, the idea, or however long ago, the idea of watching, people playing computer games online as like a thing, and there's competitions of people spending like hours doing this, you wouldn't think it was a thing that would happen. And I don't know what the total addressable market would have that been, but it was people that cared deeply about building something. It wasn't even quite that at the time. It was just having people document their lives, and then finding that actually there's an even bigger market over here, so let's adjust to that. So if you've got and also, I think there's a time before startup, which is like a project. I really like projects, because projects are personal. They're not thinking about how you make lots of money. It's just how you build something.
That's all, by the way, also the time you think that people should be looking for co-founders, either technical co-founders or non-technical co-founders. Just do the project together.
Yeah, exactly. And then you can have fun, like real fun, without having to worry about the other things. And then if you've made enough progress, you can take it to the next step and be more serious about it.
All right, awesome. So we talked quite a bit about, the non-tech founders looking for a tech founder. But it also works the other way around, of course. So here's a question from Nicholas saying, any advice for the other way around for tech founders finding non-tech or business co-founders?
Oh, that's a great one. Yeah, I think like working on the project together is a great thing. Like if this person's willing to work on something, there isn't an obvious way you make money, but there's a genuine shared passion around that same thing, then you've probably got someone that at least I would find I've got someone then I know that I could work with going forwards. Definitely want someone that you can trust. So trust is just super important anyway, like whichever way around it goes for co-founders. And I think probably just someone really scrappy, someone that's able to, create something out of nothing, whether that is new customers, new marketing, just someone outstanding. I think in general, founders, you want someone that just has something remarkable and interesting about them. Ideally, someone that is just really, really, really good at something. Could be something weird, could be something completely useless in the world. But if they've got to like a very high level of it, or they just spent like ages investigating things, it's super interesting. I have a colleague and a friend, and I would started with him anytime. He and almost one of the reasons, there's many reasons, but the one that I kind of think of is like he likes Kit Kat ice cream, which is a thing that used to exist in the past. And he spent like such level of depth trying to find the recipe and how to get it, contacting other people. And you know that if someone does that, they'll do it for other things. And that's just a super useful skill and quality.
Oh, that's interesting. Good to know. Good to know. Always look for those strange skills. Nice. All right. So considering the time, we could go on for hours, but considering the time, if there is any other question or anyone who has a last question, feel free to post them now. Otherwise, Rob, can you give the viewers one more piece of advice that you think? All right, looking at let's say the actual product, looking at the technical side of building something, of making sure that you have something that people will be using, that working together on something that people will be using. What is essential in your point of view?
Essential in point of view for someone using it. You want to build something that just does something for somebody, like something useful and valuable that is required. And if you're starting off, do something that you would use, ideally. I think often we think, I'm going to build in a different industry because I don't see any problems. Often the industry, you know all the problems that are there. So build something you can understand. And when you build something, get it out in front of someone, have them start using it, get them to tell you what's wrong with it. And people don't like saying what's wrong with something because it's disagreeable. It's not a pleasant thing to do. There's not a lot of benefit in me saying what's wrong with your thing because you'll get upset. I feel then a bit bad about it. And we just create this friction that's unnecessary. But you need that from people. And then when someone does start using it, celebrate. Just a mini celebration. Just enjoy the wins, because there's going to be so many things that you need to fix and you need to resolve over time. So when there is something successful, celebrate it.
All right. So I have two more questions that just showed up. So
sure.
Thanks for asking those. One more from Greg. What if you were sure of market that will exist but doesn't yet? How to measure interest or traction before the wave comes? And is it even possible?
I think the should you is the real question there. You can look for signals that will kind of give you some information there, but often we pick the signals that we want to and ignore the ones that we don't. But if it doesn't exist yet, it's difficult to measure it. So the should you part is the question there. And I think this goes back to if there is some sort of like hobby type project that you can start putting together that just captures the interest of what's going on there, you become first. You become something that the community understands and recognizes into it. You start building for the needs that are there. And if you're a startup, imagine this, if you're a startup and there was like a huge market that just doesn't exist, that no one's touching, that's like the most profitable thing ever, and you're like a 4-person company that goes into it, how can you ever possibly execute and achieve the potential that's there? You can't. You'd need to grow exponentially, every kind of hour to get to the size that you'd need to. So in a way, starting off in a really small market, in a niche that's not yet grown, is the right thing to do. You just want to grow with it. So if you're not sure it's there, find out what people need, start building for that need or filling that need, and then see how it grows. It will probably be more accurate than trying to find research papers that will take years to submit. I think it will be way more fun. And even if it's not successful, you will learn a huge amount that you can apply next time round.
Yeah, so that's the worst case scenario. You'd had fun and you learned.
Yeah, I like this. I mean, I talk from very personal experience about this. Like, yes, it is. That's the worst case scenario. You know, it is a great, incredible experience that changes people. So I think, yeah, that would be the way I'd
All right.
just getting
great. So last but not least, one from MH Bori. Any words on advice concerning the idea of open sourcing your code and building a startup on top of that? So at Utrecht, I think we've had GitLab, of course, as a very nice success story of this example. Looking forward to hear your thoughts.
So this is like, it's almost like an industry type business model, isn't it? It is a great thing to do. Like, open sourcing your code. Actually, it depends. So if your code is the thing that genuinely distinguishes your company from another one, as in I could take that code and copy it and put it somewhere else. I don't really need your customers. Don't need your your network. I don't need the branding. I don't need any of the support or any of the internal knowledge. Just having it go for this piece of application, spits out the thing, is worth way more money. Then you probably shouldn't do that. That doesn't sound like a good idea. But there's not many cases and scenarios like that. Even where there's quite deep down technology, most of the time there is a business built on top of it, and that business comes with a huge amount of knowledge, customers, existing footprint. And then you see, like, Airbnb is a good example. They open source loads of stuff what they do, and we can find online an Airbnb and clone. But you can't just spin one of these companies up and have the same thing. So it's not usually where the value is. And at the same time, most startups are built using open source code. So I think the risks there are relatively low. You need to figure out a business model to kind of make this work, because you're not really charging for the secret stuff, you're charging for the thing on top of the secret stuff. But open source code allows you to start finding more developers, open source contributors, potentially become, especially if someone's contributed a few times, that is a great hire. Like someone that is willing to spend their time working on your product for free because they think it's valuable and interesting. They will give you great customer feedback. They will help fix some of the things they were finding, and they potentially could become an incredible hire to have there. There's some situations like security projects. You need to have them open source so people can trust what you're building. And it's just a great way of being transparent from the beginning. So yeah, I think I would default to yes, and then think of reasons why you shouldn't, and just then close source or keep back small parts of it, and pick your license. Do that carefully.
All right, great. Again, Rob, thank you so much for your answers this evening. Thanks so much for your insights.
Thank you all. Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
So if anyone's interested in learning more from Rob, you can check out the lecture that we shared with you through Slack. And of course, Rob, just to give you another opportunity to mention the podcast.
Yeah, of course. I'm terrible at this. I always forget. But yes, so a Startup Engineering podcast. So we go behind the scenes with people like yourselves, people that are building startups, really focus on the technical teams, what they're building, how they're building it, and the challenges they had. So not just like, here's the thing that works. It's like, what didn't work along the way? What did you try? What were the steps? And then finally, how did you get there?
All right. Awesome. Again, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for watching. Thanks for the great questions. And we'll see you again next week with our Ask Me Anything with Remy Gieling, the Chief Editor of Sprout and Management Team. See you then.
Cool. Bye.